It's a delight to be back here studying 2 Timothy. One of the things that we've prayed for as God has given us the ability to meet is that as you come to MBF or just a place like this where you're engaged and meeting new couples, that literally you have the opportunity to meet someone that perhaps could be a friend for life. And that's why we have this community. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't, but at the end of the day, you're not alone. And it's so easy, is it not, to come to church week after week, struggle with things quietly, struggle with things in isolation, and really feel there's no one that gets me. There's no one that understands my problem. And our prayer is that through this group, you find that actually there are people that get you. There are people that understand your struggle, whatever it is. And that we just kind of yoke up together and do life. And it just, we have an hour and a half here or so on Sundays, and we have a message that we bring. We have time around the tables to discuss. But ultimately, it's what you do outside of this. It's the small groups. It's the lunches. It's the, meeting at business plazas if you work close to each other. That you're connecting with people because you met them here. Whereas before, like Jennifer and I, our wife, we would come to DBC and for years go, oh, I'd really like to know that couple. But I have no way to really know that couple. There's no place to connect. And that's hopefully what MBF has become. It's been 4.5 years, which is just crazy. So that's our prayer for this group. Are y'all ready to study some 2 Timothy? Let me pray as we get started. Father, thank you that you have given us another day to open your word in a group of people who want to know what your word says. Your Spirit is the illuminator, so any person with a gift of teaching could stand up here, having studied, and present your text to your people, and lives would be changed. So thank you for the privilege to be able to do that this morning with this group, and I pray, God, that your illumination from your Spirit would go into the hearts of all of us, into the deep recesses of where we hide, of where we exist, of where we find our own happiness, and would deal with us there. You would deal with us in our hearts, and you would change us from the inside out, because your Spirit is at work, and we believe it. And so we thank you for this morning. Be glorified in Jesus' name. Amen. So we began 2 Timothy 2 weeks ago. Now it's the third week. And week 1, and we're trying to answer each week, how do we live out the gospel in difficult times? Week 1, what was the answer? How do we live out the gospel in difficult times? Yeah, remember God's supply is sufficient. And so Paul is writing to his disciple. It's his last letter, as best we understand. And he is trying to communicate something to him because there is a problem inside this church in Ephesus. Timothy's the pastor there. 1 Timothy tells us that. And he's dealing with an issue inside the church in Ephesus. And he is telling him, right from the get-go, in his second letter, remember God's supply is sufficient. Why is that important? Why would that be important to remember?
Hard.
It's hard. Yeah. I mean, if you're like me, and your manifestation of being timid or pulling back is different, but whenever a difficult situation presents itself, in particular with people that are outside, like your family, and these are just people that you're just dealing with in like church setting, for example, you tend to pull back, don't you? You tend to kind of retreat. I don't know about y'all, but that's a natural thing. And so Paul says in verse 7 of chapter 1, what does he say? God has not given you a spirit of what? Of timidity, pulling back. God hasn't given you that spirit, Timothy. We set you in place. We laid hands on you. You're an apostolic representative. You are there. You are commissioned by God through the apostles to be a pastor of this church. And God did not give you a spirit of shirking the responsibility that you have been given. How easy is it to do that, though? I mean, I think if you have a heartbeat, it's easy to look at a difficult situation and go, you know what? Actually, I don't want to do anything with that. I just want to kind of let it fester. And maybe it'll resolve itself. And sometimes that's wisdom to do that, and sometimes it is. Sometimes it's wisdom to do that. But I think what Paul wants Timothy to know is that actually God's supply is sufficient. And here's his supply. Number 1, power. That's an enterprising spirit. Timothy, you have been given the ability to initiate. That's what you've received. Number 2, love. that you have received the greatest gift of love. Therefore, in your enterprising, in your initiating with others inside this church context, going against the opposition, teaching and training faithful people, you can love them as God has loved you. And thirdly, what's the third one? Sound mind. That God has given you the wisdom as you initiate, not run, and as you love, to appropriate godliness. That's sound judgment, that's circumspection, that you see all spheres and you make a decision. And so it's so important, obviously, for us as we're engaging in ministry at home, inside the church, immediate context, and this book is inside a church context, but apply to any relationship. Anytime there's difficulty, to recognize, I have not been given a spirit of being a coward. God has given me the spirit to initiate, to do it with love, and to do it with circumspection, of the ability to see all angles. And then the second week, last week, so we're answering the question, how do we live out the gospel in difficult times? That was the first week. Second week is what? Join in suffering for the gospel. Now, is the emphasis on suffering or on gospel? It's on gospel. And how often do we sometimes confuse that, right? And it's easy that now I've got to, and this has happened throughout church history, I've got to do a certain thing to show that I'm suffering so that I can be counted as X or Y or Z in the light of people or in my relationship to God. And so the focus is not on suffering, the focus is on the gospel. But what could happen as a result of focusing on the gospel? Suffering. And I'm willing to do that because the gospel is so paramount, is such a priority, is the emphasis of God, that I will do whatever God has called me to do to hold tight to that message of the gospel. And what's the message of the gospel?
Good news of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so tell me about that, more on that, because this is obviously, as we're thinking about how do we communicate this and live this out in a difficult situation. What is the essence of the gospel? You said good news. And what else? He destroyed death and brought life. So the way that I like to think about it is this. Where there was no way, God has made a way through Christ. So apply that gospel concept to any situation in your life. I'm facing this at my workplace. I'm facing this with relationships. I'm facing this with extended family. Where there was no way to be reconciled to a holy God, God has made a way. And so that message, that there's nothing that can come in, there's nothing that I can add to, there's nothing that I can bring to bear in light of the gospel that will make it any better, is a liberating thing. But the world shirks at that, right? And it has over the centuries. And so we've had battles and battles for that one simple message. In the context of Paul and Timothy, it was Judaizers, those who are preaching works to be reconciled to God. Paul is going against that, and he's saying, no, it's not works. It is the gospel. God has made a way. It's through faith. And that message, holding to that message, put Paul in prison. Now, I don't think that's putting us in prison at this point, but you may lose business. You may lose notoriety. You may lose influence inside a church if they have a particular way they want things to be. And are you willing to say, no, the gospel message, the fact that God has made a way where there was no way, through faith, is worth me losing X or Y or Z? And that's what Paul is saying. Join in the suffering of the gospel, because there is laid up for you, Paul's going to say, and I have entrusted this to God, rewards in heaven. But there is a final analysis, which is just amazing to think about that. There will be a final analysis. And so we come to this third week, and Paul is beginning, basically he's pivoting on those two things, and now he's saying, you therefore, specifically you Timothy, he's saying, be strong in the grace. And that's the answer for week 3. How do we live out the gospel in difficult times? This third section, chapter 2, verses 1 through 7, be strong in the grace. And that's what I want to focus on today. How are we strong in grace? Well, first the question is, what is grace? I think that's a question that I just go out to y'all. What is grace?
Free gift.
Free gift. It's unmerited. So, how often, if it is a free gift, unmerited, we have received, do you contemplate that in your own life? Do you, on a daily basis, wake up thinking, I've received grace? I think if you're like me, you probably go, well, not as often as I should. I didn't murder someone yesterday. I didn't do this or do that the day before. In fact, I kind of ended my day on a high note. We're doing good in our marriage. Kids are going okay. I really don't have anything to confess today. Have you been there? I mean, like seriously, have you been there at the end of your day and you go, you know what, today is actually a really good day. I didn't really sin that big today. I'm okay. And I think the reality is, if we're honest, we can land there. And we can kind of stay there. And that's not being strong in grace. That's behaviorally being acceptable to God. That I didn't do X, I didn't do Y, but what about my heart that deceived me on that? What about the way that I looked at that person? Or the way that I thought about that situation? And I think the more we begin to, at least for me, understand grace is so much more than accepting the salvation that we received because of my behavior. It's dealing also with my heart and my mind, that now I realize that's something that I should be really thankful of and grateful for every single day. To consider that God has given me grace. For me personally, one of the things that I have probably pet peeves or whatever is deceit. If there's deceit, I like go after it. I'm like, let's get to the bottom. Let's flesh out this deceit and let the truth be known. And I'll do whatever it takes to find it out in a relationship. Like Jennifer said, she's seen me deal with friends and things like that. And I'm not like mean or anything. But I'm like, well, wait a second. You said this, and now you're saying this. But that's not integrity. How do we bring this back together? How do we reconcile that? And so, I can easily become, well, honesty is so important to me, and I'm so self-righteous in my honesty or whatever. Anyway, there was a time whenever I was kind of dealing with that, and I was in a reconciliation with a person who kind of been deceitful, and I was working through that, and I had a roommate in grad school, and he asked if I had eaten the cereal or whatever, and I'm like, well, no. And I flat out lied. Right there, just flat out lied. And then it hit me, and I went, oh my goodness, I was ashamed to admit that I had done something that I shouldn't have done. And as a result of mitigating that difficult situation, I lied. And now I've got to hold on to that. And I'm dealing with it because it's so important to me to see, I don't like to see, I'm such an honest guy. I'm having now, I say, God, thank you. This is so humbling for me because if I prided myself on being honest, here I am lying. How many other things in my heart do I need to confess? Do I need to recognize that I can become self-righteous in a blink? And God used that in my life in that particular time just to humble me. You think honesty is important? I'm going to show you how you can be dishonest like everyone else. Like everyone else that struggles with sin. Here's an example right here. And so for me, grace is hard at times. I struggle with grace. And I think the church struggles with grace in general. I think if we, put it this way, what if we walked around with such grateful hearts that God saved me from my thought life yesterday? A good way to think about this is, what if we put your thought life in front of everyone right now over the last week on display? How ashamed or unashamed would you be? And what if I went through the week, the days, thanking God that He saved me from my thought life? He saved me from my insecurities. He saved me from my fears, from my inability to receive grace. He saved me from all these things. I think the more I do that, the more I understand I can be strong in grace. And so Paul is going to tell us in these 7 verses, how are we strong in grace? How does being strong in grace manifest itself? So in verse 2 he says, these things which you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses entrust. So the first way that we're strong in grace is that we entrust, or we lay, the word literally means to set aside, to set alongside someone. We put alongside someone the gospel. In other words, we are engaged in the gospel conversation with people in our spheres of influences, and we are enabling them or entrusting them with the gospel, and we're willing to do that. We're willing to lean into those conversations. So that we're thinking gospel, we're thinking message, that God has made a way where there was no way, in our relationships, in the context, Paul says, with faithful people. Do this with people that you can trust. And that's immediate context. I would back it out and say, what about living the gospel and bringing that message that God has made a way where there was no way? Self-righteousness separates us, makes me judge you, puts me in a position better than you. What if we said, you know what, I'm going to live the gospel in my workplace. And I'm going to find ways to manifest the reality that God loved me despite me. Therefore, I can love them despite them. Or I can love that person despite what they've suffered with. And that is entrusting or setting alongside the gospel in faithful people. Now, in the context, I say, these are people within your church. Let's go on. These are people within your church that you trust will take the gospel message that you have just given to them, and they'll give it to others. So you're thinking critically about the gospel message, number one. You're finding and isolating people, number two, that you can now entrust the message to, that they will then take it and bear it out in other people's lives. Let me ask you all a question. Who has God given you, if your parents, most importantly? Children. How are you entrusting, setting alongside your children, those of you who have kids, the gospel message that God has made a way when there was no way? How are you bringing to bear in your imperfection the gospel message that your mom and dad will fail you, but there's a heavenly Father who will never fail you? That's entrusting the gospel message to people. Now, in the context, immediate context, it's talking about a church situation where Paul is telling the pastor, an apostle is telling the pastor, in your church, find those faithful people who will take this message and give it to others. And why would that be important in the immediate context in church? Why would that be so important? For growth, and true growth. Because what's going to change the lives of people? Jesus. And so the more we model the gospel, that Christ is the gospel, God sent him to bring about a rebellious humanity and a holy God together, to bring that about. The more we understand that, the more we can now bring it to bear in the lives of people in our church. Guess what happens in a community? Revival. That's exactly what happened as this church began to spread. And so the first thing we do, how are we strong in the grace is that we're strong in the grace and we set alongside the gospel to people that we trust. We'll take it and set alongside others. For parents, it's your immediate context. It's your children. For those of you who don't have kids, it's your workplaces. Can you live the gospel inside your workplace and bring to bear and trust that God can do a work inside that workplace that can bring about revival? I think he could, and we believe that. Secondly he says, suffer hardship with me as a good soldier of Christ Jesus. And then he qualifies it. He says, no soldier in active service entangles himself in the affairs of everyday life so that he may please the one who enlisted him as a soldier. And so what Paul is saying is this message that we have entrusted to you, Timothy, is the message. And again, the immediate context is God has made a way where there was no way. The Jewish leaders have promoted a group that have become known as Judaizers, who are influenced by the Jewish leaders who do not want to do anything to make them mad and tick them off. And Judaizers are following Paul around wherever he goes and saying, no, it's not this by grace through faith thing. You've got to be circumcised. You've got to do this for fear of them being persecuted. And so in the immediate context, Paul is saying, we've entrusted you with a message that says, actually, it's not circumcision, it's not keeping the Sabbath, it's not keeping these laws, it's believing in faith that God has made a way where there was no way through Christ. You suffer hardship as a soldier for that message. And what does he say not to do as a soldier? Don't get entangled with non-soldier duties. And so his point is, you have been given a message to then entrust to others. Remain undistracted. What can distract us from holding that message before other people? Legalism. Morality, right? That's exactly right. That I don't do X, I do Y, I don't do Z, therefore I now am more righteous than you. Or I have a better standing. Or I'm in a position within a church. I hold this position within a church, therefore I now have X or Y or Z. You see? And so what he's saying is, you have been enlisted as a soldier to hold on to a message. Remain faithful to that message. Do not get distracted with things that contain that message. So you entrust this gospel message to faithful people who will then spread it through discipleship to others. Number one. Number two, you remain undistracted as a soldier, holding forth this message, this gospel message. Remain undistracted. And see, we're seeing this how do we live out the gospel in difficult situations? We're seeing a simple theme come up. The gospel is everything. And if we believe that that message of the gospel, that there's a king that will return, he came as a suffering servant to bring about a rebellious humanity reconciled to a holy God, if that's the gospel message, then it should be priority in every aspect of our lives. And that's exactly what Paul's trying to emphasize. This is how you deal with false teaching. You find faithful people, you entrust this message to them, number one. And as a soldier who's been enlisted, you don't go AWOL. You stay faithful, holding to this gospel message. What's number 3? Anyone who competes as an athlete, he does not win the prize unless he competes according to the rules. So we just got back from Colorado like 3.5 weeks ago, and I think I'm still on the John Denver Rocky Mountain High, I'm not sure. But I will say this, I did a trail run, 11.7 miles trail run up there, and it was incredible. It was 6.5 miles up, 1,800-foot elevation gain, and then you come back down. So it's basically 2 races. And so the first 2 miles was the most rigorous. It was extremely difficult. And there were switchbacks. It's at Purgatory Ski Resort right outside Durango. We had snow the night before, so it was like, I just felt like this is absolutely heaven. Except for the pain I was feeling in my hip flexors, in my hips, my calves, my lungs are about to explode because I'm from Texas, I'm not from Colorado. Elevation, all these things. And this gain that you're making, literally 100 feet after 100 feet, you're gaining. And at one point I saw that little turnaround, and I was like, I could actually kind of go this way and end up over here. That'd be cheating. I'm not going to do that. I didn't. Thankfully, But how many times in life do we cheat ourselves from holding to that gospel message and say, actually, I can be more acceptable to God if I do X or Y or Z. And it's no different than holding to that message, and it's hard holding this message. You're fighting for this gospel message, this gospel truth. No, my righteousness is not in what I do. My righteousness is in my faith in Christ, who has made me righteous because of my belief. There's nothing I do that makes me righteous. Holding to that is hard at times, especially when we see everyone doing everything right, or seemingly right. Holding that message is hard. But you know what? I'll make myself feel better if I start withholding this in my life, and that'll make me more righteous. And what Paul is trying to teach Timothy is compete according to the rules. Hold tight to this message. There's nothing you can do to add to this message. An athlete who competes according to the rules is the one who wins, is the one who holds tight. He's elevating this gospel message that God has made a way where there was no way. Now, inside this church, there are false teachers that have come in. They're saying the resurrection has already occurred. They're wrangling about words. They're debating about topics inside this church. They're teaching works as a way to salvation. They're doing all these things, and what Paul is trying to get Timothy to understand is the utmost. It is holding to. Does that mean being a coward? No. It's holding to this message, facing the confrontation, and not letting yourself get caught in the idea that works will save you. Because Timothy, if you think your circumcision that we did for you back in Acts, whatever it was, is what made you righteous, you have completely missed the boat. You may not be being persecuted by the Judaizers because you're circumcised. I only did that for winning the Jews, those who were not the ones that were persecuting us, for going after new Jews. Don't use your circumcision, now I'm reading into this, perhaps this was a conversation, to now put you in a position of being self-righteous compared to all these Gentiles that you're ministering to in the church of Ephesus. So compete according to the rules, Timothy. Don't start adding rules to the gospel. Don't start adding legalism in. Stay the course. And then fourthly, he says, the hardworking farmer ought to be the first to receive his share of crops. Jennifer and I just put it in our winter garden, and it's bell peppers, some spinach, some kale, kohlrabi. Anyway, Swiss chard, that's what it is, always getting confused. Anyway, and some marigolds, and we're looking at all these plants starting to kind of become devoured. And there's no fruit, there's nothing being produced. At this point, we're like, not something, it's just getting after those leaves. The bell peppers are literally just stems. What happened? They're just like little twigs. And what we found, Ruth actually found it, there's caterpillars. And they're like, I'm talking like, you caught like 30-something in one little, picking through the spinach leaves or whatever. Caterpillars have begun to devour these plants. How many times in our life are we like those caterpillars that can't wait for the fruit? That's me. And what Paul is saying is, the farmer waits for the fruit. In the context, what's the fruit? The fruit is not eating the leaves of being praised by men. The fruit is waiting for gospel faithful rewards that come because you held to the message of truth. Paul says in chapter 1, verse 18, I think is what it is. He says, I have entrusted this holding to the gospel. I have entrusted that to God, and that He will reward me on that day. In chapter 4, verse 8, he says this, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, and all those who love His appearing. That He has reserved for me, that I have held to the message that saved me. In Acts chapter 9, I have held to the message that saved me. Now I have been given this message to give to others. I'm entrusting it to you, Timothy. I've placed you in Ephesus. Compete as a soldier, or stay undistracted as a soldier. Compete as an athlete. And as a farmer, you're going to have fruits, but you have to wait for the fruits. The fruits are not to be enjoyed in this life, Timothy. Be reminded of that. The fruits are stored up for you by a God who you're entrusting, who will reward you for being gospel faithful. And that's how we remain strong in the grace. That we entrust this message of the gospel, that God has made a way where there was no way, to faithful people who will then entrust it to others. We remain undistracted as a soldier who doesn't get caught in the worldly things. And we'll get to this in the opposition piece. There's opposition that is trying to get Timothy to wrangle about words, to try to have worldly and empty chatter. They're trying to come into the church and distract him from the message of salvation that is the gospel alone. And we compete as an athlete. We don't start taking corners to win favor with people. We hold to this message despite the suffering that comes. And as a farmer, we wait and we'll have our share of crops. And Timothy, a farmer has to wait. He says, God is guarding what I have entrusted to Him, and it's the crown of righteousness stored up for me. And so Paul is saying to Timothy, in essence, be strong in the grace that God has given you. You're strong whenever you disciple, whenever you stay faithful and undistracted, whenever you don't cheat, and whenever you wait for the next life. Now, apply this to our world today. How can we get distracted today? Busyness. How can we get distracted with the gospel today? That's right. You're right. Elections. Is that not blowing everybody's news feeds up? It's like Saul. You remember whenever Saul was it's like 1 Samuel 6 or something like that, when Saul becomes king. All the people come to Samuel and go, hey, all your kids, they're no good. Those kids, yeah, we want a king like the pagans. What's fascinating, though, is that God had actually made a promise. This is a total rabbit trail. God had made a promise in Genesis 17, confirmed in Deuteronomy 17, that they would have a king, but you're going to get the king you want because you went about the wrong way. And I look at our elections and I go, we're getting what we wanted. We want entertainment. We want to push the envelope. We got it. Don't get me started. What else? Yeah, what else? How can we bring in gospel and faithfulness and become distracted with it? Worry. Yeah, that's actually, you said that. That's really good. How does worry? Yeah. Oh, it's you, Victor. I'm with you, man. I hired Galen. So how does worry become, keep us distracted? How does worry do that?
Well, you hit it a couple weeks ago, but sometimes instead of focusing on the season of life we're in now, redeeming that time and focus on what God's doing with the relationships we have now, we just fret over mistakes yesterday or last week or 5 years ago.
And what is that essentially saying? Not trusting. And that's the essence of the gospel, is it not? Grace is what? We said it earlier, didn't we? Undeserved favor. So what does that mean? That I am believing about the gospel and now grace? What does that mean? Essentially, what does it mean? Who have I transferred my trust from and to? And if I receive salvation because of nothing that I have done, then I should live my life working that I can do that will bring me into a right place with God. And so I can get distracted thinking that the way to be gospel faithful is to do this or to not do that. And I haven't received this amazing gift on a daily basis that God has made a way for me in my own self-righteousness or unrighteousness to already be holy. to be cloaked with Christ. Does that mean, though, that we don't behave right? No, we do behave right because we have been cloaked with Christ, but it means whenever I don't behave right, what do I have a promise for? I'm restored. I'm reconciled. There's nothing I can do that will take away the love of God. There's nothing that I can do. I think I've shared this here before. I had a professor this last summer. Some of you have heard it even in conversations that I had with you one-on-one, but he gave me one of the best definitions I've heard on sanctification. Sanctification is basically becoming holy. Becoming holy is sanctification. It's a great theological term that people love to debate about. How are we sanctified? How are we this? How are we that? He gave me the most simple explanation. He said that sanctification is our growing understanding of how unholy we are, the closer we get to our understanding of how holy God is. And I went, wow. So he said, basically, the gap goes like this. If this is depravity, what is this? No, this is Y, this is X, is that right? Yes, Y, X. If our depravity is here, God's holiness is here, the gap is doing this in our understanding. I am understanding the more I read God's Word that God is so much holier than I thought. And I am understanding the more I read God's Word, I am so much more unholy than I thought. And he said, that is sanctification and growing your knowledge. And you think about godly men and women that you've seen in their lives well, who have said this, and I've seen this. Don't look at me in my life. I'm just a sinner saved by Christ. And I think that captures what Paul is wanting Timothy to understand. You, Timothy, be strong in this grace that's been given to you. You did nothing to attain it. Those people that are coming in saying, add something to it, wrangle about words, debate about all these things, the resurrection has already occurred, have a party now, enjoy life as it is. No, Timothy, hold fast to this gospel message. Don't be distracted. Compete according to the rules. Don't add anything to it. And there will be a day whenever you will receive the fruit of your labor. It's not now. Don't be like that caterpillar. That's what I tell myself. Don't eat the leaves and kill the fruit. Be faithful. Be faithful to what God has given you. Any comments on that or thoughts? Any examples?
Hey, Drew, just real quick, one of my heroes is Sam Maliga from Romania, and back in 1989 under the dictator that was running that place. Yeah, thank you, Chesapeake. Well, anyway, prior to that, he'd gone to a Billy Graham conference in Romania and was saved. And because he was starting to share the gospel at work in the communist country, he was fired from one job, get another job, get fired from that job. He was on a third job. He was sharing the gospel on toilet paper, writing scriptures that he had memorized, and he didn't have a Bible. He had pieces of the Bible, and he was trying to share the word of God with other people, and he got caught doing that, and they put him in jail up in the northwestern side. Anyway, a couple days later, the next day they're going to send him off to Russia, some Siberia kind of jail, and he knew he'd never come back. Everybody he knew that ever went up there never came back. So he and two other men, Christians, decided to break out of the jail, and they traveled 72 hours to get up across the river, the river, and get out of the country. Anyway, it goes on, the story goes on, but my point is, he had to suffer a lot of hardship, going without food for 3 days, walking, crawling on, swimming a river at night, not getting caught, losing his job, all that he suffered for the gospel, just as early as 1989, 88, 89. And he came here, he went to BTS, as soon as he got here, didn't even know English yet. But he suffered the gospel, he was strong in the grace, and that's what that's how you get through all that. He said, I just focus on what God done for me, and grace.
That's so good. And I think, we have a hard time viscerally relating to that or emotionally relating to that. I think, as a whole, we're not in a place, at least right now, where we're having to suffer for holding the gospel. How much more important when we have the Son of God, if you want to call it that, the sunshine, the sun rays of God, or the shade, if you like shade, whatever you want to call it, that we're in the comfort of God right now, that God has given us a land where we can open the Word. How much more important is it for us to not go the opposite direction, where we begin to prioritize our comfort as a God, our success as a God? So I may not be struggling with the negative, but I may be struggling with the positive. All the blessings that I have now all of a sudden become the priority that can take away the gospel. That can take away gospel suffering. That doesn't mean go around wearing camel hairs and all that. What I would contend is Here's what I would contend it would mean in taking an Old Testament principle. Be the conduit of the character of God. Be the conduit of the character of God. Hold fast to the gospel. Be the conduit of the character of God. What is that? You remember Ruth and Boaz? Totally aside right here. Total rabbit trail. You remember Ruth and Boaz? That story of Ruth, everybody's like, yeah, I've heard that like 50 times. Get on with your point. That story, to me, captures the essence of what we're to be in 21st century America. It captures the essence. What did Boaz have? Riches. He had fields of plenty, right? He had lands. He had workers. He had all these things going on. Who was Ruth? She was a nobody, specifically. She was an alien, right? She was an alien. So she wasn't a Jew. What else? She was a widow. What else? She was an orphan. What else? Woman?
Good
Yeah,
luck.
what else? 4. Okay? Boaz looks at her and goes, oh, man, here's an opportunity. Bring the dump trucks of the grace of God and pour it all over her. God made a promise to Abraham that one day from his seed will all the nations be blessed. Boaz, as a type, poured out the blessings of God to who? The nations. How incredible. How much do we have that we can now be conduits of the character of God and pour it out on the roofs all around us? That's being strong in the grace so that I don't hoard what I have. My problem is not the negative and suffering. It could be at some point. The same principle applies. How can I be the conduit, or how can I be God's conduit for all those that are around me? And so that's a complete aside, somewhat relates to 2 Timothy. Let me sum up 2 Timothy. How do we live out the gospel in difficult times? Number 1, we remember that God supplies sufficient. Number 2, we join in gospel suffering, meaning we hold to the gospel. Number 3, we remain strong in grace. That word, be strong in grace, is a passive imperative, meaning the action is done to the subject. It's an imperative, it's a command. So you're being commanded to let the grace be done to you. In other words, don't get in the way. Let the grace of God be a flow through you. And we do that by being undistracted, by remaining faithful to the rules, that the gospel message is the only way, and by anticipating that one day God will look in the final analysis upon my faithfulness to that gospel message. He will analyze me, and I'll be a recipient of the shares of God's promises, rewards, whatever you want to call it. And that's how we remain strong in grace and live out the gospel in difficult times. Any final words or thoughts, comments? We'll go to the tables.
I thought one thing, as a soldier, the armor of God, and we're assured victory.
Yeah, excellent. Ephesians 6. So we have principalities of darkness all around us. We're to put on the armor of God because God has given us an armor to wear. Excellent. Other thoughts or comments?
Drew, just one thing that's repeated here is he says, with me, that you heard from me, with me, or what I say.
Excellent.
So this is not Timothy solo by himself.
Wow.
It's this horrible
Excellent point.
It's a relationship.
And I think, okay, you know Mel Summerall? I'm going to bring him back here again just to talk on this one topic that you just brought up again. Mel has been bending my ear, which is one of the reasons why I'm teaching this way. Literally, it's because I want you all to feel that this is not just another lecture. I want to engage, and it was because of relationships. And that's exactly what Mel has been bending my ear on, is that relationships change lives. And that's so important. You're exactly right to emphasize that Paul has known Timothy. Timothy has known Paul. He has seen him live this out. It's not something he's just preaching and not doing. It's something he's being faithful to. In fact, as best we know, he's in prison for that faithfulness to the message. Excellent point. Other comments or thoughts?
Paul, Timothy, faithful men, others.
Yeah. So that it's a reproduction. So we are benefactors of someone being faithful to this, Timothy being faithful to this. Excellent. All right. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this morning. You've given it to us as a gift. We didn't deserve it. God, it's not because we're righteous that we have all these blessings abounding. It's because you have chosen to give us blessings abounding. And there are difficulties that we face in the midst of these blessings that are abounding. And there are many in this room who would say amen to that. And they're right in the middle of a struggle. So, Father, would you help them? Would you help them right where they are? Would you remind them that you have made a way where there was no way? That if you can do that for our salvation, you can do that for our circumstance. And that's gospel living. I pray that we live that out so that you see family trees changed from these couples in this room who are willing to hold on to a message that God sent His Son to be our Savior, to die in our place, to pay the penalty for our sin, so that we would have hope, not only in this life, but in the life to come. God, do your work in Jesus' name.